Hi everyone! Welcome to Azad Revenge Stories channel. My name is Tiffany Gordon, and at 36 I stood on the stage at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte gripping my master's degree in law. After 4 years of late nights and sacrificed weekends to pursue my dream of becoming an independent lawyer, this was supposed to be the most unforgettable moment of my life. I scanned the audience for my parents Deborah and Edward Gordon, hoping to see their proud faces. But instead 3 empty seats stared back at me in the very spot they had promised to sit. They didn't even bother to come. I had planned this day for months, sending them the date, the time, even a map to the auditorium. "We're so proud of you, Tiffany." My mother had said, her voice warm, but hurried as if her mind was already elsewhere. And then they made the excuse of being too busy. Busy with what? A small party at my sister Shannon's house to celebrate a contract she had just signed as a freelance event planner, a party more important than my graduation. I had believed this degree would finally make them recognize my efforts. I was wrong. As I stepped off the stage, my phone buzzed in my purse. A text from my mother. "We need to talk urgently." Moments later, I saw 30 missed calls from my father, all within the past hour. My heart pounded. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. I never imagined that just minutes later, everything would change forever. How about you? Have you ever been overlooked by your family on one of the most important days of your life? Share your story in the comments and let me know where you're watching from. I've lived in Charlotte, North Carolina for the past 10 years, carving out a life in a modest one-bedroom apartment just outside downtown. I work as a junior lawyer at Harper & Stone, a small law firm handling family disputes and estate planning. It's not glamorous, long hours poring over contracts, mediating messy divorces, and drafting wills for clients who argue over every penny. But I love the work. It's precise, demanding, and it fuels my dream of opening my own law practice one day, where I can take on cases that matter to me, like helping single parents navigate custody battles. That dream kept me going through the toughest years of my life. My parents, Deborah and Edward Gordon, lying about an hour away in a quiet suburb in the same split-level house where I grew up. They are both retired now. My mother was a school secretary, my father a mechanic, and they spend their days gardening, attending church socials, and doing on my older sister Shannon. At 40, Shannon is a freelance event planner, always talking up her latest gigs, like they are the talk of Charlotte. Her most recent big win was a $10,000 contract to organize a small wedding for a local couple. It's not exactly high society, but you'd think it was the event of the year, the way she brags about it. My parents hang on her every word, treating her like she's some kind of celebrity. Meanwhile, my years of grinding through law school barely get a nod. Growing up, it was always like that. Shannon was the outgoing one, charming everyone with her big personality. She'd throw together backyard barbecues or school talent shows, and my parents would rave about her creativity. I was the quiet one, buried in books, winning debate competitions and academic awards. But those never seemed to matter as much. "Shannon's just so vibrant," my mother would say, as if my straight-a report cards were somehow less impressive. My father would chime in, "She's got a real spark, that one." I learned early on that being reliable and hardworking didn't get you the same applause as being flashy. When I decided to go for my master's degree in law, it wasn't just about career advancement. I wanted to prove something to myself, to my parents, to the world. I enrolled in the part-time program at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, designed for working professionals like me. For 4 years, I lived a double life, full days at the law firm, then 3 nights a week in class from 6:00 to 9:00, followed by hours of studying at my tiny kitchen table. Weekends were no better. While friends invited me to brunches or weekend getaways, I was holed up in coffee shops highlighting case law until my eyes burned. I turned down concert tickets, skipped birthday parties, and missed out on dating because every spare moment went to my degree. The schedule was brutal. I'd wake up at 5 in the morning to prepare for court filings, work a 10-hour day, then rush to campus for lectures. By the time I got home, it was past 10, and I'd still have assignments to finish. I survived on coffee and sheer stubbornness. My parents knew how hard I was working. They'd call sometimes asking how I was holding up. "You're always so busy," my mother would say, her tone implying it was somehow my fault. Shannon, meanwhile, would post photos of her latest event setups on Instagram. Sparkly centerpieces, budget floral arrangements captioned with things like "living the dream." My parents would comment with heart emojis while my updates about surviving finals got a polite, "Good job, Tiffany." The worst part was the isolation. Law school wasn't just about the coursework. It was about proving I could handle the pressure without breaking. I'd lie awake at night wondering if it was worth it. Would this degree finally make my parents see me the way they saw Shannon? Would they realize that my quiet determination was just as valuable as her loud confidence I told myself it would be? I pictured them at my graduation clapping as I walked across the stage, their faces lit up with pride. That image kept me going through the sleepless nights and endless deadlines. Shannon's constant need to be the center of attention didn't help. She'd call me sometimes, dropping hints about her latest big project while barely asking about my studies. Once over coffee, she laughed and said, "I don't know how you do it, Tiffany. All that studying sounds miserable. I'd rather be out making things happen." Her words stung, but I brushed them off. She didn't understand what it meant to build something lasting, something bigger than a one-off event. But my parents bought into her hype. They drive into Charlotte for her client meetings or help her set up for events, while my requests for a quick visit during exam season were met with excuses. "We're tied up with Shannon's latest project," my father would say. "You know how busy she gets." I tried not to let it get to me. I focused on my goal, finish the degree, pass the bar, open my own practice. I saved every extra dollar from my paycheck, building a nest egg of $60,000 to fund my dream. It wasn't easy. Charlotte's cost of living isn't cheap, and law school tuition ate up most of my disposable income. But I was determined to make it work. I told myself that once I had that degree in hand, things would change. My parents would see what I'd accomplished, and maybe, just maybe, they'd stop putting Shannon on a pedestal. Looking back, I realized how naive I was. I thought a piece of paper would shift decades of favoritism. I thought my hard work would speak louder than Shannon's showy charm. But as the months ticked by and my graduation day approached, a small part of me started to doubt. Would they really show up for me? Or would Shannon find a way to steal the spotlight again? 6 months before my graduation from my university, I started planning what I hoped would be a day I'd never forget. I wanted my parents, Deborah and Edward Gordon, to see me walk across the stage to feel the weight of what I'd achieved after 4 years of law school. I called my mother on a quiet Sunday afternoon, catching her as she sorted through old photo albums. "Mom, my graduation is May 15th at 2 p.m. I said, my voice tinged with excitement. "I really want you and Dad there. It means a lot to me." She paused, then said, "That sounds wonderful, Tiffany. We'll put it on the calendar." I called my father next, his voice rough from a long day in the garage. "Got it, Tiffany." "Sounds good," he said. Their words felt like a promise, and I held on to them, imagining their proud faces in the crowd. I spent weeks scouring Charlotte for the perfect restaurant for a celebratory dinner after the ceremony. I settled on Lolt's Viter, a small Italian place downtown with warm lighting and homemade ravioli. It cost $300 to reserve a table for four, including myself, a splurge, but I told myself it was worth it for a milestone like this. I booked it with my credit card, pushing aside the slight sting of the expense. Then I bought a dress, an emerald green sheath that cost $200. Simple but elegant, perfect for wearing under my gown and for dinner afterward. I even made a hair appointment at a salon near my apartment, a rare treat for someone who lived in practical sweaters and jeans. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of joy instead of the usual grind. I sent my parents an email with every detailed date, time, auditorium location, even a link to parking instructions on the university's website. "I can't wait for you to see me, graduate," I wrote, adding a hopeful, smiley face. My mother replied the next day, "So proud of you, Tiffany. Looking forward to it." My father's response was short. "Thanks for the info. See you then." I read those messages over and over, picturing them clapping as I accepted my master's degree in law. It felt like the finish line was finally in sight. 3 weeks before the big day, that hope flickered. I was at my desk reviewing a client's custody agreement when my phone pinged with a text from Shannon. "Hey, I'm throwing a small party on May 15th to celebrate a new contract," she wrote. "Just landed a $10,000 wedding gig. You should come by after work." My stomach twisted. May 15th was my graduation day. I'd told Shannon the date months ago over coffee when I was buzzing about finishing my degree. Had she really forgotten, or was something else going on? I called her right away, my fingers gripping the phone. "Shannon, your party's on my graduation day," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I told you the date. Can you move it to another weekend?" Her response came fast, light, and careless. "Oh, Tiffany, I totally forgot. But it's not a big deal, right? It's just a ceremony. My part is for a huge career move, and I've got clients who can only make it that day." Her words hit hard, like a door slamming shut. Just a ceremony. 4 years of late nights skipped, vacations and endless case law reduced to nothing. I tried to reason with her. "Shannon, this is my master's degree. It's important to me. Can't you pick another day?" She sighed like I was making things difficult. "Tiffany, relax. I already sent invites and it's too late to change. Besides, Mom and Dad can probably do both. It'll work out." I ended the call, my throat tight with frustration. Do both. My ceremony was at 2 p.m. and her party started at 4 across town. It didn't add up. I'd hoped my parents would prioritize me, but Shannon's breezy confidence made me doubt. Was she trying to pull their attention away like she always did with her flashy events? I didn't have proof, but the thought lingered sharp and unsettling. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling of my apartment. I'd spent months imagining my parents in the audience, their faces lit up as I walked across the stage. Now I wasn't so sure. Shannon's party, her so-called huge career move, felt like a shadow creeping over my moment. I told myself they'd show up, that they wouldn't let me down. But a quiet doubt nodded at me, whispering that I might be wrong. The morning of my graduation day started with a quiet buzz of anticipation in my chest. I woke up at dawn, too restless to sleep, knowing this was the moment I'd worked 4 years to reach. I slipped into the emerald green dress I'd bought just for today, its smooth fabric a reminder of how much this milestone meant. Over it I pulled on my black graduation gown, pinned my cap in place, and checked my reflection. The tassel swayed gently, a symbol of every late night and missed weekend I'd poured into my master's degree in law. I took a steadying breath, telling myself this day would be everything I'd hoped no matter what. I arrived at the campus auditorium just after 100 p.m., blending into the crowd of graduates in their identical black gowns. The air hummed with excitement, classmates posing for photos with their families, parents holding flowers, siblings waving balloons. I scanned the faces around me, searching for my mother or father, clinging to the hope that they'd show up despite Shannon's party. Maybe they'd chosen me this time, I thought, holding on to their vague promises. But as I moved through the lineup, gripping my name card, I saw no sign of them. My stomach tightened, but I pushed the doubt down, focusing on the moment. I'd earned this degree, and I was going to walk that stage. The ceremony began at 2, with graduates filing into the familiar strains of pomp and circumstance. I took my place in the alphabetical lineup, my eyes darting to the audience. The seats were packed, faces blurring under the bright lights, but none were my parents. I kept looking, telling myself they could be late, maybe stuck in traffic or circling for parking. But as the university president spoke about perseverance and new chapters, a cold realization settled in. They weren't here. They'd chosen Shannon's party over my graduation. When my name was called, Tiffany Gordon, Master of Laws with honors, I crossed the stage, my heels steady despite the ache in my chest. I shook the dean's hand, took my diploma case, and moved my tassel from right to left. The applause was polite, the same for every graduate, but it felt empty, like it belonged to someone else's moment. No one shouted my name. No familiar cheers broke through. I forced a smile for the photographer, but the loneliness was crushing. This was my triumph, and I was facing it alone. Back at my seat, I clapped automatically for other graduates, my mind spinning. I'd given my parents every detailed daytime location. I'd practically begged them to come. Why weren't they here? Shannon's party, her $10,000 wedding contract couldn't possibly outshine this. The doubt I'd felt after talking to her weeks ago sharpened, cutting deeper. Had they ever meant to show up, or was her spotlight always going to win? After the ceremony, graduates spilled onto the lawn outside, families reuniting in a burst of hugs and laughter. I stood on the sidelines, my diploma case heavy in my hands, watching parents embrace their kids and snap proud photos. I felt like an outsider in my own victory. I pulled out my phone, hoping for a text from my mother or father, an apology, an explanation, anything. There was nothing. Out of habit, I opened Instagram, scrolling through posts from classmates with their families. Then I froze. Shannon had posted a photo an hour ago right during my ceremony. It showed my mother and father at her house raising wine glasses in a toast with a small group. The caption read, "Celebrating my big contract win with my favorite people." My breath caught. They were there at Shannon's party, smiling like my graduation didn't matter. I zoomed in, seeing my mother's proud smile, my father's arm around her. The hurt hit like a wave, raw and overwhelming, stealing the air from my lungs. But another feeling stirred, cold and sharp suspicion. Shannon knew my graduation date. I'd told her months ago. Why had she picked today for her party? It wasn't just a coincidence. I'd been climbing in my legal career, planning to open my own practice, and she always seemed uneasy about it, like my success was a threat. Was this her way of keeping the focus on her, of pushing my moment into the shadows? I shoved my phone into my purse, my hands shaking. I tried to hold on to the pride of my degree, the years of work it represented. I posed for a few photos with classmates, forcing a smile as they chatted about their family plans. But that Instagram post burned in my mind, a wound I couldn't ignore. I headed to my car, the diploma case heavier than it should have been. I'd planned a dinner at Leo's Veter, but now I wasn't sure I could face it alone. Something felt wrong, and I was starting to think Shannon had planned it that way. Leaving the campus, the diploma case on the passenger seat felt heavier than it should, weighing down the hollow moment I'd just lived through. During the ceremony, I'd been too busy crossing the stage and forcing smiles for photos to check my phone. Merging onto the highway toward my apartment, I glanced down, expecting only silence. Instead, my chest tightened. A text from my mother glowed on the screen. "We need to talk urgently." Below it, 30 missed calls from my father, all within the past hour. My grip on the steering wheel tightened as a swell of dread and confusion rose inside me. What had happened? I pulled over to a gas station, my pulse racing, and called my father back. "Dad, what's going on?" I asked, my voice unsteady. His reply came fast, strained with panic. "Tiffany, it's Shannon. She fell at her party down the stairs. She's hurt bad in the hospital now. We need you here." My mind spun. Shannon hurt? The image of my parents toasting at her party captured on Instagram flashed in my head, reigniting the sting of their absence. "Which hospital?" I asked, trying to focus. He gave me the address, Caroliner's Medical Center, 10 minutes away. I hung up, torn between worry and the raw hurt still burning in my chest. I drove to the hospital, the Charlotte skyline fading into dusk as my thoughts churned. Part of me wanted to turn around to let them handle whatever mess Shannon had caused. But another part, the one still tied to family despite everything, pushed me forward. I parked and rushed to the emergency wing, my gown still folded in the back seat. In the waiting area, I found my mother and father, their faces pale and tense. "Mom, Dad, what happened?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. My mother's hands twisted at tissue, her eyes red. "Tiffany, thank God you're here." Shannon was drinking at her party, celebrating that new contract. She tripped on the stairs, fell hard. The doctors say she's got a broken femur and a mild concussion. She needs surgery. $50,000, maybe more. We don't have that kind of money. My father nodded, his voice low. Her freelance work doesn't come with good insurance, Tiffany. We are out of options. Can you help? I froze their words, hitting like a cold wave. $50,000. I had $60,000 saved from my law practice. Every cent scraped from years of careful budgeting. They were asking me to give up my dream for Shannon, the sister who'd planned her party on my graduation day. "You're asking me to pay?" I said, my voice shaking. "After you didn't show up for my ceremony, you were at her party smiling for photos while I stood alone on that stage." My mother flinched, her voice breaking. "Tiffany, we wanted to be there, but Shannon said her party was critical for her career. She said it was a one-time chance to impress clients, that your ceremony was just a formality. We thought you'd understand." Her words cut deeper than the empty seats had. "A formality." I stared at her, anger flaring. "Shannon said that she knew it was my graduation day. I told her months ago. Why would she call it a formality?" My mother hesitated, her eyes dropping. She said her contract was more important, that we needed to support her career. We believed her. My blood ran cold. Shannon had known exactly what my graduation meant to me. This wasn't an oversight. It felt calculated, like she'd planned to steal my moment. I pulled out my phone, my hands trembling, remembering a message my mother had forwarded weeks ago, one I'd skimmed over during finals. I opened my email app, scrolled through my inbox, and found it an email from Shannon to my parents with me copied by mistake. "My party is a huge career move." It read, "Tiffany's graduation is just a formality. She won't mind if you skip it to support me." The words burned into me, undeniable proof. "Mom, you sent me this," I said, holding up my phone. "Shannon told you to skip my graduation. She planned this on purpose." My mother's face crumpled, her hands covering her mouth. "Tiffany, I didn't realize. I thought she was just excited about her contract. We are so sorry." My father stepped closer, his voice pleading. "We made a mistake, Tiffany, but Shannon needs this surgery. Please, you're our only hope." I stood there, the hospital lights buzzing overhead, torn between the family I'd tried to please and the betrayal I couldn't unsee. Shannon's email wasn't a slip. It was a deliberate move to keep my parents' focus on her, to dim my light. And now they were asking me to sacrifice my savings, my future for her. The air felt thick, their eyes heavy on me, waiting for an answer. But all I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding with years of being pushed aside. Standing in the hospital waiting room with my mother's apologies echoing and Shannon's email burning in my mind, I felt the weight of their betrayal heavier than ever. My parents' pleading eyes, my mother's crumpled face, my father's desperate voice. They were asking me to give up my future for the sister who deliberately tried to overshadow me. $50,000 for Shannon's surgery. It was nearly everything I'd saved. $60,000. Every penny set aside for my dream of opening my own law practice. I stood frozen, the hum of the hospital lights amplifying the storm inside me. Could I really do this for a family that had chosen her over me? I took a deep breath, my hands clenching into fists. "I'll pay for the surgery," I said, my voice low but steady. "But this is the last thing I'll ever do for this family." My mother gasped, her hand reaching for me. "Tiffany, please." "We didn't mean," I cut her off, shaking my head. "No, Mom. You made your choice. Shannon made hers. I'm done." My father's face fell, but he stayed silent, his shoulders slumping. I turned away, unable to look at them any longer, and walked to the hospital's billing office. I arranged a bank transfer for $50,000, watching my savings, the foundation of my future, drain away with a few key strokes. It hurt, but not as much as the years of being pushed aside. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at the confirmation email from Lulfsviter for the celebratory dinner I'd planned. I'd pictured my parents there toasting to my master's degree, but now the thought felt hollow. I called the restaurant and canceled the reservation, my voice flat as I explained I wouldn't need it anymore. The server on the line hesitated, then said, "I'm sorry, ma'am." I hung up, a strange calm settling over me. That dinner was supposed to mark a new chapter, but I realized I didn't need their approval to start it. I needed to let go. The next morning, I blocked my mother's number, my father's, and Shannon's. I removed them from my email contacts, unfollowed them on social media, and deleted their messages. It wasn't just about anger. It was about protecting myself. For years, I chased their recognition, believing my achievements would finally make them see me. But Shannon's email, her deliberate attempt to dim my light, and my parents' willingness to go along with it, showed me the truth. Their love came with conditions, and I was done trying to meet them. 2 weeks later, I packed up my apartment in Charlotte. I'd been researching cities for months, looking for a fresh start where I could build my law practice on my terms. Miami felt right, vibrant, growing with a demand for lawyers specializing in family law like me. I signed a lease for a small office space downtown using the last $10,000 of my savings to cover the deposit and basic equipment. It was a risk, but it was mine. I hired a moving company, loaded my belongings into a truck, and drove south, leaving Charlotte behind. The skyline faded in my rearview mirror, and with it the weight of my family's expectations. In Miami, I threw myself into work. I took on clients, single mothers fighting for custody, families navigating messy estates, and built a reputation for being tough but fair. My office was small with mismatched furniture and a coffee machine that barely worked, but it was mine. Every case I won. Every client I helped reminded me that my worth didn't come from my parents' approval or Shannon's shadow. It came from the years I'd spent proving myself to myself. My parents tried to reach out in those first few months. My mother left voicemails I never listened to. My father sent emails I marked as spam. I heard through a distant cousin that they were struggling cut off, not just from me, but from other relatives who'd heard about their favoritism. Family gatherings grew tense with aunts and uncles whispering about how they'd chosen Shannon's small-time contract over my master's degree. Their social circle shrank, their pride in Shannon no longer enough to fill the void I'd left. Shannon faced her own fallout. A client at her party, a wedding planner who'd seen her stumble and fall down the stairs, spread the story in Charlotte's tight-knit event industry. Word got around that Shannon was unprofessional, drinking too much at her own event. She lost a $15,000 contract for a corporate galer, a blow to her already shaky freelance career. With her broken femur and concussion, she couldn't work for months, relying on savings that quickly dwindled. I didn't feel joy at her struggles, but I didn't feel guilt either. She'd made her choices just as I'd made mine. Looking back, I see now that my graduation wasn't just about a degree. It was about learning who I am when the people I love most let me down. For years, I thought their approval defined me, that if I worked hard enough, they'd see my worth. But standing alone in Miami building my practice, I realized the truth. My value doesn't depend on them. It's in the choices I make, the boundaries I set, the life I create. I paid for Shannon's surgery, not because I owed her, but because I wanted to close the chapter with no regrets. Cutting them off wasn't easy, but it was freedom. If you've ever had to stand up for yourself, to walk away from people who couldn't see your worth, I want to hear your story. How did you find the strength to choose yourself? Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Your voice matters, and so does your story. Subscribe for more real stories about finding your own path. I invite you to subscribe to the Azad Revenge Stories channel. Like this video and support me further by hitting the hype button so the story in this video can be heard by many more people. Thanks to all.